The Egyptian President, Hosni Mubarak, has finally stepped down and handed power to the military, according to the country's vice president. It comes after more than 2 weeks of mass uprisings in the country, which has been accompanied by a wave of violent clashes between pro and anti-government protesters. We're bringing you live pictures at the moment from Cairo here on RT, and after 30 years in power, Mubarak announced more than a week ago he would not participate in September's presidential election. Western powers, including the US, have been calling for a transition of power, leaving its decades-long ally isolated. And RT's Gaina Chichikan joins us now live for more on the events. Gaina, there you are in the US, in Washington. Has there been any reaction from the United States so far, as it seems to be strongly involved in Egyptian politics?
Bill, in the U.S., it's presented as a triumph of democracy in Egypt. Mubarak left, and this is what the Egyptian people wanted, and that's how a democracy should work. But that's the official rhetoric. But little is known about what really happened in Cairo last night. Mubarak said in his address that he was not leaving until September. And why is it that his vice president, Omar Suleiman, is announcing his departure? What also happened, the army stepped up, the army which is largely funded by the United States. And the question is, who is in power in Egypt right now? Washington can hardly be considered to be impartial when it comes to power struggle in Egypt. It's a strategic location for the U.S. Mubarak has been a close ally for 30 years. The U.S. has been pumping billions of dollars into the Egyptian military, and they don't want to lose that. There is a great chance that they won't lose that, although the official position is up to the Egyptian people to choose their next leader. But Washington is apparently pulling some strings. The man who was sort of in charge during this tumultuous transition, who is seen as a possible alternative to Mubarak, is a big CIA friend. It's Omar Suleiman. He has reportedly orchestrated the brutal interrogations of terror suspects abducted by the CIA. Also, in the run-up to the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003, the CIA relied on Mr. Suleiman to beat confession out of a detainee who said Saddam Hussein had connections with al-Qaeda, something that was proven to be false, but back in the day was perfect for the Americans, who desperately needed an excuse to invade Iraq. So he's an old friend, not hostile to Israel, and that's basically all the U.S. wants from a future leader of Egypt.
Well, as you were saying earlier, the US saying this is a victory for democracy. We're seeing a positive response from the rest of the West, which has been calling for changes, of course. But tell us, is that because of a desire to help the Egyptian people, or perhaps something deeper than that?
Bill, in statements, of course, U.S. officials say the demands of the Egyptian people are legitimate, and they would want to see a leader who hears his people's grievances. But there is a certain hypocrisy here. Just a year ago, when asked about human rights violations by the Egyptian government, I remember Obama's response was, Egypt is a close ally, and it's not the job of the United States to lecture Egypt on democracy and human rights. At the same time, the U.S., as we know, never shied away from bashing others, non-allies, for violating human rights. But in recent weeks, the rhetoric for Egypt has definitely changed. The U.S. took up its old role of democracy preacher, but if you watch American TV, listen to American politicians, it's all about U.S. interests, not really about Egyptians. They want democracy for Egypt, but a democracy that will be fine with the United States. And we remember what happened with democratic leaders who were elected, who came to power through revolutions in Ukraine and Kyrgyzstan with a huge support of the United States. Later on, I mean, at first everyone was happy, but later on they were rejected by their own people. And also, by the way, we also have a report for you on outgoing president, Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak. Here it is.
Mubarak is history. The words of the Danish Prime Minister today, an accurate prediction. President Mubarak has resigned. Scenes of celebration mark an end to the leader's 30-year regime and a victory for the Egyptian people.
You know, all the people here didn't need Mubarak anymore. Obama said to Mubarak to try to fix all the problem here, and Mubarak can't fix nothing because we don't need Mubarak, we don't know this system. If we will die here, we will change this system.
We are the people of Egyptian people here. We will take the right decision.
But Western willingness to be so vocal about what amounts to an internal dispute has been viewed as an inappropriate interference, and a contradictory one at that. The U-turn in opinion coming from Western leaders who until so recently supported Hosni Mubarak as a force for stability in the region.
My belief that an orderly transition must be meaningful, it must be peaceful, and it must begin now.
Perhaps then Western policy should have pressed far harder upon existing regimes such as Mubarak's that restricted political freedoms and damaged economic progress. Instead, the US gave him $1.5 billion a year for his armed forces alone, and it was largely Western support that kept Mubarak in power, a fact that the Egyptian people are well aware of.
They supported the Egyptian regime for such a long time, and in fact they armed the Egyptian regime, and now they are talking about democracy and respect of human rights.
The protesters' struggle against the autocratic regime saw them fighting against empty promises and weak concessionary comments, and not just from Mubarak.
The European and world leaders don't have a proud record in terms of sticking up for democracy and human rights sufficiently in the past.
With Mubarak's departure, the Egyptian people will now be looking for a real political commitment to change, both internally and internationally. Tahrir Square has been the recent epicenter of Egypt's democratic hopes, the stage for the people's revolution. And it's there that the battle for better governance should be fought. Western involvement now needs to tread carefully to ensure that they're encouraging genuine and lasting reform, as opposed to simply fueling an impassioned revolution that risks replacing one tyrannical regime for another. Sarah Firth, RT.